Hey, hello, and welcome back to the new show. I'm your host, Random Rob. Tonight I'm talking about Hereditary. Now, I saw this film a while ago, didn't really care for it, but was kind of puzzled because I had heard so many good things about it. And I couldn't quite figure what all the hype was about. Specifically, when you hear people say things online like, best horror movie since The Exorcist, Toni Collette is amazing. I really like Toni Collette. The first movie I remember seeing her in was a dramatic comedy called In Her Shoes with Cameron Diaz. In Her Shoes would probably be categorized as a chick flick. I thought it was a really intelligent comedic drama. Had some really interesting notes in it about family dysfunction and things of that nature, and I really thought Toni Collette's performance was quite amazing in it. But I felt differently about her in Hereditary, and I decided for purposes of talking about the film that I would go back and watch it one more time, which I just did. I took a few pages of notes, but no, on reviewing it one more time, I still didn't like it and had a clearer idea about what it was about Hereditary that bothers me as a movie. And I don't really need to look at the notes because the plot logic problems weren't really what bothered me about this film. What bothered me about Hereditary was that it was uniformly uncomfortable from beginning to end. That's not necessarily a problem for horror films or psychological horror films. In fact, for purposes of what I need to talk about, I will compare Hereditary in a couple of ways to the Denis Villeneuve movie Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal, because both films, even though the subject matter is very different, had a very similar kind of stylistic approach to their material. Hereditary was written and directed by Ari Aster. He's done another horror film called Midsommar, which I have not seen. And from what I gathered looking at the IMDB page, Aster had originally written this film as a family drama about grief and suffering after the death of a family member, but later decided to retroactively turn it into a horror story. And as I mentioned before, the film is uniformly uncomfortable pretty much through every scene of the film, and that would be fine, but the problem with Hereditary, the thing that really bothers me about this movie, is there's no dramatic contrast in it, or emotional contrasts. The film pretty much just sticks between misery and dread and terror. I don't understand this kind of horror film. For me, the principal quality of cinema is to have my various emotions played by the movie. And not only does having emotional contrasts in a horror film, create different highs and lows, but it also serves as a way to distract you from where the story is going. The aim of a good horror movie should be to distract you as much as possible from the inevitable horror, so that when it arrives, it makes a crescendo. Hereditary has a couple of crescendos in that they are louder than the other parts of the film, or where music is played. There's very little soundtrack in this film, except for, a couple of ambient buzzing noises they use throughout it. But the film, from the moment it starts almost, pretty much tips its hand that this is a story about witchcraft, it's a story about possession. The possession involves the children and the grandmother. There's no colorful side characters, there's no neighbors who come over, there's no other POV characters except basically the mother and the son. And the son spends most of the movie in this sort of catatonic fugue, and the mother spends most of the film being hysterical. And I like Toni Collette, and I think she's a great actress, and I think she did a great job with this script. But watching her in this movie was the equivalent of watching Shelley Duvall swing the baseball bat in The Shining for 2 hours. There's no relief from the miserable qualities of the film. It just continues. It's just flatline the whole time, and no misdirection, no red herrings. When the helpful friend Joni shows up at about 40 minutes into the film, it's pretty obvious she's a villain, because there's nobody else who's appeared in the movie, except for some of the kids at the party who we never see again, or the people at the therapy group who we never see again or know by name. There's also not a lot of coverage in the movie in terms of the camera. Most of it looks like it was done with one camera, except for a couple of dialogue scenes. The entire experience was static. And this is why I mentioned the movie Enemy earlier, was to make a point, is that Enemy is similarly, it's a very dour film. None of the characters in Enemy ever seem to be sort of radiating any positive qualities. It's always sort of negative framing. But at least in Enemy, there is a tension between the college professor character and the actor character, where the one has sort of a almost homoerotic obsession with finding out about the other, and the actor seems to have an almost spiteful kind of desire to fuck with the college professor. And this back and forth drives the motion of the film. It changes gears. Hereditary doesn't change gears. Every scene proceeds slowly. There's not a lot of editing at any point when anyone is speaking. There are long pauses between every sentence that a character says. Like, Hereditary felt like it would have made a really good, maybe like hour-and-a-half movie or 80-minute movie, but it got pulled out to 2 hours. So have I told you what really bothers me about the film? No, I've been setting it up. What bothers me about this film relates to the psychiatric term flattening of affect. Flattening of affect is a classic feature of schizophrenia, in that over time, emotional highs and lows kind of settle into a non-emotional state. And that's how Hereditary felt. Watching Hereditary felt like having a panic attack and then taking a bunch of Valium. That same kind of mood. Drawn out, unbearable. And it bothers me when a film is so emotionally flat, so without contrast, or any sort of detail in it to make your brain think about something else, to try to trick you out, that it really made me wonder, who is this film for? And do they enjoy this? Is this a new style of cinema where there's no surprise for the audience other than the sort of obligatory people crawling across the ceiling, or seeing a strange figure in the shadows, or appearance of insects in large numbers? You know, all those things are very stock horror images, and they're a lot more interesting when you don't know what they relate to. Again, this film makes no secret of where it's going. It shorthands the entire story to you immediately, and I just don't get it. I don't get the appeal. I don't get what's to like about Toni Collette freaking out for 2 hours. I'm baffled by it. Is this a new style? Toneless, emotionally flat cinema. And one could come at me at the argument and saying, well, you know, you're meant to be scared. And I get that, but after half an hour to an hour of being made uncomfortable without any kind of break, I don't care anymore what's going on. You know, it's not the same as saying, well, the film is relentless. It wasn't relentless, it was just unending. It was just so static and one note. I don't get it. My favorite horror movies are the ones where you can laugh. You can be laughing a minute before something horrible happens, and then experience a shift, a change in tone, you know, where you're having fun for a moment before the scares come, not foreshadowing everything from the start. I just don't get it. I do not get it. I don't get the appeal. I feel like if this is considered a great horror movie of the moment, I kind of worry about the genre, or I worry about the people who are watching it, what their expectations of cinema are. All drama should have an emotional range. Even if you're only touching at certain points for a moment, you have to have some kind of emotional peaks and valleys to give it the rhythmic sense of life. Are people into emotional atonality and dissonance now? Does it have something to do with more people taking medications now? Could that be part of it? The film felt medicated. I wondered if Ari Aster was medicated. when he was making it. And I found one review on IMDB, and I think maybe it summed up what I'm trying to say here. The review said, 10 stars, I never want to watch it again. And one of the other things that the person said in their review was that the movie went through a whole range of emotions from terror to despair. Technically, terror and despair is a range of emotions, but without joy or contentment or something, some other emotion. You know, there's a couple of scenes in the movie where Toni Collette gets angry. That was a little bit of a change, I guess. When I heard so much hype for it, so much praise for it from the online horror community, it really makes me wonder what's going on in people's heads. Because Hereditary is almost a movie with some big emotional pieces missing from it. Again, maybe it's a style. Maybe people like that. Just not me. Anyway, thanks for checking in with the new show. If you feel that I was harsh about Hereditary or wrong about it, or there's something I missed that you'd like to tell me, go through my Patreon page, leave a comment. I'd be happy to respond to it. And also, if you've noticed a sort of weird emotional atonality in any other horror movies that you've seen, a curious flatness of human emotion, let me know, because I'd be curious to check out those films too. Alright, thanks for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe if you like what you're seeing. And until next time, I'm Random Rob. This is the new show. Good night.